Nick Chapsas recently released an opinionated video about Blazor, his thoughts about it, and it didn't seem like he was fully on board with it, but that's okay. The comment section, however, was really positive about Blazor, both from project managers, developers, other roles in the companies, so that gives me a lot of hope for Blazor's future. Now, I've been using Blazor for nearly 5 years now, both for my hobby projects as professionally for other companies. And I absolutely love Blazor, but every now and then I'll have to address some minor issues that I have with Blazor development. As I recently covered, prevent this Blazor pre-rendering issue. Today I'll be addressing a different issue, and that is the onParameter set lifecycle hook, which is the method invoked when the component has received parameters from its parent in the render tray, and the incoming values have been assigned to properties. So then we're talking about these parameters being passed from the parent in the render tree. I'll just be working with this weather component, so the page, and I cut out the logic to a separate component, weather table. I'm trying to mimic a scenario that could occur in my own applications. So we've got this weather table with summaries initially set to freezing and chilly. This is a local parameter property. Then an event callback on the component whenever the weather changed. Do I even call this? Probably not, but I may want to do that after the forecasts are set. So there would be a wait on weather changed dot invoke async. Okay, handle weather change. So I'm just gonna print console log, not do anything. Then a button, change summaries, simply going to update the summaries property with different values, and then optionally do this state has changed, which should update the DOM to display the new forecast. Anyway, whenever this changes, this data, those new values should be passed to the weather table, and the weather table will go through the onParameter set async method. There's no summaries, don't do anything otherwise. In it, the forecasts. The problem here, however, how it's now implemented, if there's no summaries, okay, nothing's gonna happen, but likely we're gonna get in some kind of render loop because we're initializing the forecasts. After this, we are doing a callback to the parent in the render tree. But by this triggering, sometimes I just do something like this, which is nearly the same. But by this invoking, this is also going to trigger an update in the DOM, so a render update, let's say. And that re-rendering is going to pass the summaries again, despite that it didn't change, the values didn't change. It's going to pass those summaries to the weather table again. We're going to the init forecasts again. We're going to use that callback again, and we're back here, and we're gonna trigger a render loop. And this is now a bit stupid, but let's say what's more of a real scenario is, let's say I do hot state changed. I didn't make that now, but hot state, and then something like that. On changed, just like this. This is also going to update the parent in the render tree, so this page, and since this summaries is an element of this page, property of this page, this is going to get passed to the, well, it's going to be seen as some kind of change in rendering or some kind of update in this page. So the summaries are going to get passed again to the weather table. I meant, let's say we do this. This is not going to get into the loop, but potentially it is going to trigger that init forecasts more than we would like. Because, as I just mentioned, this updates the rendering, this summaries gets passed again, but now maybe only when the hot state changes, so maybe that's only once, twice, maybe 3 times while you're using the application. It just because that's just one component. But let's say we have a different component. Let's see what else could change. Token expiry, watcher, something like that. Unexpired. And yeah, there can be many components on a page that somehow alters the state or the rendering of this parent page, which each of those are going to, since this is an element, a property of this page, is going to cause that these summaries are passed again to this weather table. Let's say how Blazor works. Let's say we didn't have a parameter on this weather table. These updates are not going to affect this weather table, since the weather table has no, it's not touching anything from this parent component. But this is a scenario. To prevent this problem, we could simply check whether the summaries actually changed before doing this init forecasts. Oops, this has to be equals. I think. Then we don't want to do anything. And maybe we need to turn these into sorted sets to check for the equality, but that's not the point of the video. I find this a bit unfortunate that we would need to do all of that just to correctly use this on parameter set async method without getting into a loop, which often happens when I'm still, after 5 years of developing in Blazor, nearly 5 years, still sometimes encounter issues with this method. And I think something similar may happen with an on after render async method. You can also easily get into a loop and then change a property which re-renders the component, and then the after render async method is called again and again and again. So you can get into loops. Now, when I started using Blazor, I didn't assume that this on parameter set async would be triggered with the same values when the parameter didn't really change. Nothing really changed. The value didn't change. It's just passed down again as the exact same value. And why did I have that assumption? Because before Blazor, I was using Angular. And if I remember correctly, in Angular, there was more of a way to check if something actually changed, or maybe it was even built in to see if it actually changed. So in Angular component, you have this input as the parameter, like we have in Blazor. And then you have this ng-on-changes lifecycle hook or method that we use to check whether the input parameters values actually changed. And this has a parameter, changes, simple changes. And if we take a look at what that logs, then it's something like that. An object with the property name, simple change, current value, first change, and previous value. So that's kind of already built in to check. I could be wrong, but I don't think this ng-on-changes would trigger if we pass exactly the same value again to that component. I could be wrong, but I don't think that's the case. Anyhow, if that was the case, we still have that previous value, current value, and to check whether we actually have to update or not, which is a bit simpler than what we just did with Blazor. So now maybe we could build something similar to do that, to always pass an object and the changed value and the previous value and so on. But let me first go over how I get around this issue and because the more my application grows, the more risk I have of running into this infinite loop, rendered loop. So what I would do, not only for this scenario, but also just to communicate whether values changed over multiple components that are not each other's children or parents, then I would create an event and a method to notify whether something changed, to manually call after, for example, the forecasts happened here. So that would be inject weather state, and then I would do state dot notify weather change manually. Maybe we should also check if the values actually differ, but then in the parent component I would do a initialized, maybe async, maybe not, but I would inject this state as well and subscribe to that event that I posted there. Weather state, then say state dot on weather changed. Oops. And this could be even make an async method, but preferably you make a method like handle weather changed. And this should be at least a task, because I made this into a function task. This also could just be an action, and then you can just use a void method for handle weather changed. And then you need to implement the disposable and unsubscribe that event with a minus. So now we can remove this on weather changed and get rid of the potential infinite render loop. Okay, but we still have the problem of these causing extra renders, which in turn may cause unnecessarily extra initializations of the forecasts. But of course, I implemented this faulty logic to prevent extra forecasts when none of the summaries changed. Anyhow, I don't want to be doing this previous summaries and then maybe previous forecasts and the checks and everything. Don't want to be doing that for each property on my components or on my state or wherever. I also don't want to be doing something like this for a dozen of properties. Another approach that we could have done to check whether these summaries actually changed without using this onParameter method is using these getters and setters. And then maybe, I'm not saying this is a proper way to do it, but maybe we could do something like init forecasts. Simply as another way to act when the summaries are passed and to check whether the incoming value actually differs. So the value would be the incoming. And now we could maybe remove this onParameter method. So let's see, and that's what I mean. I don't want to be doing this for every damn property. So instead of the weather change, you could say the summaries changed. Maybe, not sure if let's see, could I do this? Notify summaries changed. Oops, no, notify summaries changed. And then I would be subscribing to that event. Let's see, state.on summaries changed was equals handle summaries changed. And that would be similar as this method. Let's see. And then in here I would do the void init forecasts. And then we still need to implement the disposable. And unsubscribe. Oops. Like that. That could be possible. I hope I'm doing it right. This seems to be recursive, so maybe there's an issue here. Maybe I'll need to use a backing field, something like that. But I think you get the idea. Do let me know if something like this is your preferred approach, or something like this maybe. Let me know in the comment section below, or maybe you found another way to avoid infinite loops and use this onParameter method. Do let me know in the comment section below. Okay, now I'm quickly gonna extract these events into functional components, and then afterwards I'm going to look for a different approach so I don't have to repeat this pattern over and over. So what I'd like to do with these components, I would say, I could say weather change listener, or do a public event callback. Call this on weather changed. Let's do it like that. Weather change listener on weather changed. Then we could repeat. Oh, don't need to, but well, here we would do some stuff and then say change, invoke async, and then communicating or triggering a re-render or anything like that on this on weather changed. Let's see. Okay, something like that. That would look as follows: on summaries changed and on summaries changed. So now we've got these two callbacks which are going to trigger a state has changed, so to speak, a update in a render or an update of the DOM. And now two extra different times, this summary is going to get passed to the weather table. Now we could move this summaries object to the state. Better idea maybe handle summaries changed, and then init forecasts in here. Ideally, we would only trigger this method when summaries are actually different than the originals. So maybe we could do a this changed, for example, and say status summaries does not equal on the previous summaries. And then we could say not is changed, return. So we don't call this trigger that method. So we don't reinitialize the forecasts based on the same summaries. That would be just double. And we'll likely want to add state notify summaries change when actually updated that. So now we're working with a global state variables on there, and we are using the observer pattern in which we can subscribe to events and notify whether the value changed. So this would be my preferred way to work with the global state and the observer pattern, rather than what I showed in the beginning with the onParameter set and passing the parameters and so on, which is a valid use case, but once you need to become a little more reactive to changes on the global state, then I would prefer this approach over potentially getting myself into infinite render loops. The main difference is actually just that you have more control over when you actually want to trigger a state change or a parameter property value that changed. Because this onParameter set can now trigger not once, but twice, maybe 3 times on change, and that's going to cause potentially unnecessary code execution, HTTP calls, whatever you're doing on that change. And these events, this actually reminded me, this observer pattern and so on, actually reminded me of, not only of Angular's observer pattern, but also the MVVM, the model view model pattern in .NET and C#.NET while developing desktop applications. That pattern to have like real-time changes or a more reactive application to state changes, they used the iNotify property changed interface. And I was thinking, can I use that in a Blazor application? So I bumped into this blog post from ssw.com.australia, and I saw this iNotify property changed, some kind of base state, also using this event property change event handler. I think I've seen that before as well in being used in Blazor. And then a property changed with the caller member name. Okay, invoke property changed. This new property event arced the name. Let's see if this is a more generic approach. They changed system component model. Okay. Then we get all this code. So property changed event handler, property changed caller member name, property name to invoke it of set field. And that actually already has the logic to compare the original value in the field and the incoming value. And first, if it equals each other, means it didn't change, return false. If it does differ, update the field to the new value and trigger the onProperty changed with that property name, so we can subscribe on the onProperty changed. Let's try that for the summaries. Okay. See, this expects okay, let's just call this handle property or state changed, something like that. And then let's say for example, if the target property is the summaries property, then we'll trigger this on summaries changed. Okay, so I was thinking about calling this set field, but this wants could be a better idea to make a public method, specifically update summaries. Call that set field. This wants a backing field. Private. And let's see, now update summaries. Like that. Instead of this. But we could also use this approach instead by using this. Could say update summaries and pass the value, and this should return summaries, something like this. It would also be feasible, and then you can simply update like that. Or we could just inline the entire thing and not use this method, although this method could be useful if you want to go for this approach. Now we had to empty out our summaries, so I'm just gonna set okay, so I moved these forecasts to the global state just to mimic a more real scenario, and I'm simply going to print the first forecast temperature in Celsius. I removed the summaries change listeners since I don't have any interest in that on this page. And what's going to happen is we're going to initialize the forecasts. Let me show you. And it's going to display the first row's temperature in Celsius. It's got the initial summaries. If I click change weather, it's going to take the new summaries and have random temperatures, and this is the first one. Ooh, I'm logging the weather changed in here, although this is not. It was logging in here. I guess we can move those initial ones to the backing field in the state. Let's do it, keep it like that, not to confuse ourselves. So running that initially gives handle weather changed. So because it initialized those forecasts, clicking that should give handle summaries changed, handle weather changed, and everything updated accordingly. Whoops. I added these state has changed in 2 ways, just in case your UI doesn't update. And lastly, we could likely follow this pattern for the forecast as well, but I'm not going to do it, just so you have at least two different ways of subscribing to state changes. I'll likely add this iNotified property changed pattern with this set field method. We'll likely add that to my package AugustVN Razor State, which you can get all of the code for free by simply signing up at giscode.com/products to check out my brand website products as well. Don't forget to check out my Patreon, where I'll post the source code of this project, and then don't forget to check out their blog posts. There's a lot of cool stuff in here to improve your Blazor apps. Okay, so that was a very long-winded way of displaying or solving one of the issues I encounter every now and then with that onParameter set method. If you liked this video and it had any value to you, hit the subscribe and the like button, and see you in the next one.